This production is supported using public funding by the National Lottery through Arts Council England. Welcome to another episode of the Bhandwagon Podcast, but not just any episode. This is a special episode as part of the playlist for the digital resource book that you'll see on the Bhandwagon.com, the creative resource. So there is a series of 5 podcasts, and I will be opening it up with my guest, a very, very special guest. And most importantly, as I said, the resource book itself is inspired by Mai Bhago. And today we're going to go into a little bit of the life and times and the legacy left with Mai Bhago, with Paramdeep Kaur, who is a archivist, a Sikh historian. So this is actually clever stuff now. It goes away from the usual kind of guest that I get in, and I'm really, really looking forward to this. So, Bonnie, how are you? Welcome.
Thank you, I'm fine, thank you.
Thanks for coming down. I really appreciate this, and I'm seeing this as a real kind of learning opportunity. One, about your career in itself, and then also around the life and times of Mai Bhago. So we'll get into the little bit of the resource book as well, if that's okay. So, archivist, what does that mean?
So an archivist is someone who works with historical documents and helps facilitate research and preserve history. So,
just for me, what would a day-to-day look like? Because, you know, when I think kind of an archivist, that as a kid, the closest that what I would get is kind of Attenborough documentaries, or you'd see Jurassic Park is a good one. And then my kids watch this one program around at the Natural History Museum. I forgot his name right now, but that's my kind of experience of that. What does a day-to-day look like then?
Okay, so every historical institution has an archive. An archive is a list. It's a kind of treasure trove of records. And an archivist looks after those records and makes sure that current records are collected and preserved for the future, and gives access to historic records for people's research, for just learning and for the future generations.
So then, obviously, you've specialised then in a niche around sort of Sikh history. Then, like, isn't that really difficult considering you normally go, if you're looking for, let's say, I'm going into my classic stereotype here, where if you're looking for bones, you'll go to a country and you'll study and examine and you get that around. I'm guessing a lot of the Sikh history would be in India and that. So how does it work then? Well,
actually, a lot of the Sikh history was brought to England with the East India Company. So, you know, a lot of it is in London. So before the British, I work at the British Library, but before that I worked at the British Museum, and they have a wonderful collection of Sikh coins, for example, and that's where my research began.
Is there like a favourite piece then, or something that you've particularly discovered, or something that doesn't get the attention that you think it should get the attention?
Absolutely. So in the British Library we have the Gotka of Maharani Jind Kaur. So that was her personal Gotka, and that was brought over with lots of documents and lots of other, rare Punjabi books. And I don't think that deserves. I think that deserves more attention than it has done.
Well, you see, I think there's been quite a lot of press sometimes where Sikh artifacts, for example, go into auctions or just not. Is that a growing market that's happening where more and more Sikh artifacts are coming onto the market?
I think now perhaps it's dying down, but definitely in the early 2000s there was a growing market. A lot of English collectors were selling their personal collections, and so we had Sikh items coming on the market. But with that, a lot of Sikh collectors were buying them. So in a way, it's good to kind of bring those objects back into the community.
How far do you reckon that we are away from having a dedicated kind of Sikh museum? Is that the kind of the utopian sort of view, or is that?
Yes and no. So we have a few kind of museums. There's one in Leicester and Derby, but at the same time, the real important items are still with British institutions. So I don't think a community museum would, I mean, it would be great for the community, but it wouldn't have the same appeal as a national institution.
Is that more around kind of like safety, or is it for more, not safety, I mean security is probably the word?
Security, and also the really important collections are still with the British, unfortunately.
So, I mean, okay, yeah, that's it might have been preserved, probably the best way.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it might be better for preservation, yeah.
And do you get a chance to go to the different Gurdwara in India and do the tours around to see?
Yes, I mean,
there?
I've had, we've had a lot of research trips in Punjab to see how they conserve things. And obviously it's not on the same scale, but...
I feel reassured actually that there's somebody like you there who's able to kind of have the interest there, because it's not really a field that many can... It's not something that I would think on the top of my head that, you know, people would go into this kind of... It is a creative kind of art, it's, you know, history and art are entwined together as well. So
absolutely.
You know, how difficult is it or do you see people coming, more people like yourself coming into that field?
Yeah. People are getting more and more interested in their heritage and their history, but making a career of it is always quite difficult. And obviously, with Asian backgrounds, people, you know, are drawn towards careers that pay better, and obviously the arts. That's something that you have to forfeit is a good salary.
Yeah.
So it has to be. It comes from your dedication and your passion. Yeah.
So I'll just go a little bit about the resource book, you know, for people out there. So it's a digital resource book, designed for young Punjabi Sikh women, and it's kind of exploring the arts and the coping mechanisms around kind of social media anxiety, but having the philosophy of becoming a digital warrior like Mai Bhago. So when we think of Mai Bhago, how significant is she in Sikh history?
I would say she is one of the most influential and inspiring Sikh women because of her leadership skills, her courage, and the fact that she was able to balance the whole kind of Sant Sabai philosophy. So being an amazing warrior, but then having that spiritual learning as well.
So for those people around who probably just don't know much about her, can you just give us kind of in context what the life and times and what the political or what the culture was around around when she was around?
Yeah, so at that time, women, you know, would normally be in the home and, you know, be serving their families and not really going out into society that much. Let alone being a warrior. So with Mai Bhago, I think it was her husband and all of the Singhs, they were fighting with Guru Gobind Singh, and then the Mughals, you know, kind of threatened them and said that if they divorce themselves from the Guru and say that they are no longer affiliated with him, they can go free. So they kind of retreated from battle and came home, and when Mai Bhago learned of this, and she was devastated, you know, and so she kind of encouraged them to go back and led them back into battle and said, how ridiculous, you know, I can't believe you're doing this. Your prime commitment is to your Guru, and I will lead you, I will go back. And then she kind of reconnected them with the Guru.
So breaking that down, if we have a look at it, so we've got kind of the gender inequality that we see where it is now, and Sikhi thrives itself on being a champion on gender equality, not inequality. But for her at that time to stand up in front of all those all the soldiers who come back,
absolutely,
and you know, challenging them, and actually therefore putting to the side and say, well, I will go myself, and leading the way. I mean, that must be super rare, because when you hear kind of history and battles when when you're younger, you don't really hear some of those stories. And why do you think that Mai Bhago doesn't necessarily get the, I'm trying to find the words correctly here, probably why is he kind of celebrated more, would you say, especially with young people in Sikhi?
I don't know. I feel that it's still very male dominated, I would say. Maybe it's because of the people that have told our history, it was mostly males. But I don't think she has the recognition that she deserves, because if it wasn't for that pivotal moment, the Sikh history would have been a very different story.
Why is that?
Because she led them back into battle, and then the soldiers had divorced themselves from the Guru. So had she not done that, who knows what would have happened. And then we wouldn't have had the Jali Mukte, we wouldn't have had the kind of liberated soldiers and that battle of Muktsar. So it would have been a very different series of events.
So after she's gone into battle, survives, what was the kind of her role then? What was her legacy from that point?
So from then on, she became one of Guru Gobind Singh Ji's important disciples and stayed with him until the end, and then she lived a very long life, and I think there was a Gurdwara kind of dedicated to her, and then I think people kind of revered her at the time in that area. So I think it was near Hazur Sahib. So that kind of legacy is very important. However, I do feel it's kind of got lost beyond that a bit. But I don't think she has been celebrated as much as she deserves. However, there is a festival called Mila Maggi that happens in January in Muktsar, where they do celebrate Mai Bhago. So
and the Battle of Muktsar is is the actual battle of where it happened. Where it happened from there.
Yeah.
And so when we think about the interactions and we have with Sikh history, it's often kind of glossed over. We don't really necessarily get into the details. In your role as an archivist and as a Sikh historian, do you get to know and see a lot more detail that doesn't necessarily get the mainstream attention?
Yes, so there's lots of sources, as you can imagine, and lots of different opinions, lots of primary sources, accounts that were written by Mughal governors, for example, about battles. So that, in a way, is a way of looking at history with a different lens.
And then, how do you think that we can, as, let's say podcasters or people in the arts and that, do more to kind of highlight not just Mai Bhago but different examples of Sikh leaders or influencers or role models to come more to the forefront?
I think there should be more discussions, maybe more visits to historical places, and maybe more lectures, from historians around these subjects, and maybe using those primary sources as well. So using historic items to tell more about the history and to inspire the future generations.
Is there any sort of first-hand, you talked about sources, is there any kind of primary sources from Mai Bhago herself, any artefacts that you know of?
Unfortunately not from that time, it's quite early. But
what time are we talking?
Like the 1600s.
Yeah.
But we have coins.
Okay.
And they're important because we have coins from kind of Banda Bahadur era, we have coins from the Sikh Missile period and from Maharaja Ranjit Singh's period. So they are primary evidence of the way we had a state, a nation state of some sort.
You talked, we talked about the significance of obviously having a female sort of brave warrior in terms of that. Did she create a legacy in terms of like with the missiles after? Was there prominent Sikh women that were around at that point? That are there kind of figures who might not get a lot of attention?
There are other figures as well. One of them, another really important figure is Maharani Jindagaur. I mean, that's later than the Missals, but then, you know, she was also very important politically and tried to keep the Sikh Empire going. So she's a very important figure, and hence why I said her Gotga is really important at the British Library. So we could link kind of these inspiring women with some of their things, if we have them, some of their items from their lifetimes, to tell the bigger picture.
What do you think in terms of the lessons that you've seen over your career, and even if you take anecdotally the story and the life of Mai Bhago, what do you feel that the lessons that we're failing to stop? So, you know, sometimes the saying is history often repeats itself, doesn't it? And you've got a really unique position, because you've got an eye in the window in terms of what history is telling you, probably a lot more than what, you know, the kind of glossed up stories.
Yes.
But you got an eye in the history in terms of what lessons you could see, some of the lessons of what's happening now. What do you think's missing? Do you think there's anything that we, as a community, for example, or as humanity universally, that we're missing?
I think we need to look to the past constantly in order to inspire our future and in order to lead our own lives and apply all of the principles that we're lucky to have in our history, because they're not outdated, they're very much relevant to today. You know, they're timeless. And I think it's really important that each and every one of us use those principles, apply them to our daily lives, and follow in the footsteps of our ancestors.
So the resource book in itself is designed for kind of like young people. How do you kind of make Sikh history more appealing to young people? It's because a lot of the stuff that we do, it comes down to sometimes it's marketing, isn't it? You know, if you're changing your audience, you're changing the way how you're describing information. You know, to a different age group, it's different kind of marketing that's there. How do you think that we can help improve the marketing for young people to get involved in Sikh history?
I think just adapting it to what they know. So obviously you have a lot of kind of cyber stuff for young children, you know, they like superheroes and that sort of thing. But kind of going back and using the characters from our history and making them relevant today by making them into heroes and using their the principles, you know, that they were guided by, like courage and leadership and kind of bravery, using them but just adapting them to the modern day.
Mai Bhago in spirit is still with us today, if you think of all the values and that around. What would you say if she was here in a physical form? Do you see what kind of fight that she would be championing? What do you think?
What kind of fight would she be championing? Probably the way we've become really unfocused in our everyday lives, social media, obsessed with kind of ourselves and just not focusing on what we're really here to do, is to, you know, our path and our responsibility of helping others, but being on our own spiritual paths. So.
Yeah, a little bit of a tricky question that was. I'll just
right.
put you on the around it. So when we look at the characters of old around, it is sort of male dominated. It is sort of I don't know. You just get told in certain ways that, you know, this person revered and that, and it also reflects it in art as well. There's not that much in there. So the Mai Bhago image, you know, and Kanwar Singh has kindly, you know, shared the image with us and for us to use. Do you see that as well in how often do you come across paintings and stuff and that from like?
Yeah, so if you still go to some Gurdwara in Punjab, still have the frescoes that were painted on the walls from like the 19th century, and sometimes they do, like you will come across some like of like Mother Gujri or Mai Bhago, like really small tiny pictures. So they do exist, but few and far between. and it's usually they're kind of lost in there a little bit. So it's a matter of kind of bringing those images out and kind of perhaps making more modern adaptations based on those historic ones for today.
As parents and guardians who might be, watching this or listening to this and that, is there any sort of advice that for parents in order when we're giving education, especially Sikh education, to young people, for us to be, what should we avoid doing?
I think we should avoid stories that don't have kind of a solid kind of basis, and maybe think about kind of primary sources and think about what stories we're actually telling them, whether they're accurate. And that's quite important, because sometimes you have different versions of stories, and one person thinks one thing happened, the other thing the other. Although our history is very much based on an oral tradition, it's important to kind of do your own research, I think, as parents, as much as you can, and then communicate the best messages that you can to your children. Yeah,
I've had that kind of difficult as well, as when you're having conversations with young children and saying, Bhandwagon Singh is obviously clear stories, but you will see some people kind of tone it down or changing the narrative around it from there. I mean, that doesn't make your job any easier as well, isn't it? So that's the reason why I was asking, which is, just how important it is to kind of stick into those actually primary sources to validate the story.
And I think the main thing is to stick to the kind of principles of the story, which is about kind of faith and dedication and that sort of thing. If you stick to those main morals of the stories, you can't really go wrong, and not fixate on the details. I think
But I think we're coming towards the end of this bit. So I give an opportunity to the guest to either jump on a bandwagon, get off a bandwagon, or if there's anything they want to get off their chest, that this is their space to do so. So for you, I want to kind of make this a little bit unique, which is because yours is such a specialist and brilliant. I mean, if I was in that role, I'd get lost in it, and I don't think I'm kind of equipped to have the dedication to that. What would your kind of tips be in terms of if you wanted to go down this route and go into this career? What would your advice be?
I think it would be to follow your passion, because most people who go down this route are very interested in history or art, and that they're passionate about it, and so passionate about it that they're willing to kind of sacrifice like lifestyle in terms, as I mentioned before, in terms of salary and that sort of thing. So follow your passion and use, as I said before, use the history to inspire kind of the future. I think that's really important. So looking into the history, and history is not just history. We're making history now. We're making history every day. So in a way, it's timeless. It's not history. These are just principles that we need to live by, whether 100 years has gone past or 1,000 years has gone past. So we just need to keep focused and review the main principles and the teachings that we have in our heritage.
I've never heard history sort of summed up so eloquently at that bit of that, and I think I'm going to take that away from this. History's timeless.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Barry, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time out and doing this. So, if anybody had to get in contact with you, if they want to get more information, especially around being an archivist or a Sikh historian, how do they get in contact with you?
They can email me. I'm happy to share my email address with you if you.
Sure, if they contact me, I'll pass it along. And that.
I'll be happy to.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye.
that was saying.